Hi, I'm Darren Heinrich and welcome to today's improvisation lecture. Today we're going to be checking out Kenny Barron's fabulous post-bop tune called Voyage. Now this is a great tune, first recorded February 1986 on Kenny's album called What If. And about a month later it's recorded again with Kenny Barron on piano, but for Stan Getz's album, which is called Voyage. They're both really great versions. I suggest that you check them both out. The Stan Getz recording is a little bit hard to find. I couldn't find it on streaming services, but it is available on YouTube for you to check out. So we're going to do some harmonic analysis and hopefully give you some ways of navigating this tune in an improvisation setting. So let's get started. So let's talk about the chord progression to Voyage. When you take Voyage in its entirety, it's quite a unique song. There's no other tune quite like this one, even though I think in some ways it shares a little bit of DNA with Thelonious Monk's Well You Needn't. So, with the A sections to this song, with one notable exception, what happens in the A sections is literally another day at the office when it comes to minor key tunes. We start off with the 1 chord, 4 bars later we hit the 4 chord, and from that point it's minor 2 5 1s back to the tonic chord. Nothing unusual about that. What is unusual about this A section is the side slip up a half step, in this case to F sharp minor. I guess that's a little bit like the side slip that you'll find in Thelonious Monk's Well You Needn't, even though the chord types are different. Monk's got, major chords or dominant 7th chords, depending on how you play that. Whereas Kenny is very much in a tonic minor harmony here. The bridge is another matter. I think the bridge also shares some DNA with Well You Needn't. So what do I mean by that? So Voyage, the key centers in Voyage in the bridge move up by half steps. And to pull that apart a little bit further, the first chord of the bridge is D flat major 7. So why does that work? Why does that sound good to us? I think about it and I hear it like this. The key center at the start of the tune is F minor. The relative major of F minor is A flat. And the 4 chord of A flat is D flat major 7. And any time that we get to the 4 chord of a tune, the music gets a lift. And that's definitely the case. That's definitely how I hear the harmony to this song. When we hit the bridge, it's like the slate has been wiped clean and we're in new territory. And what makes the bridge work is that territory is constantly shifting. Kenny moves the key center up in half steps every 2 bars via a 2-5-1 progression. And the reason why I think it shares some DNA with Well You Needn't is in Well You Needn't, even though Monk is using a dominant 7th chord, his bridge starts on D flat 7, and that moves up in half steps and then back down in half steps. So it is a little bit different to Voyage, but the musical effect is the same. Rising in half steps ramps up the tension and keeps the music moving forward to that final A section. So next, let's have a look at some chord scale relationships that you might use for improvisation on this tune. So here's a few observations on Kenny Barron's piano solo on this recording. So I've transcribed his 2 choruses. Everybody who solos takes 2 choruses on this tune. And there's some interesting things that happen. Some you'd expect, other things you wouldn't expect. So he often uses rhythmic motifs to develop ideas on the first 2 chords over the F minor and F sharp minor chords. That's a big feature of what he does. And it's interesting to me that he seems to be quite free with the 7ths of those chords. Sometimes it's the major 7th implying the melodic minor scale, and other times it's the minor 7th implying Dorian minor. And there's one in the second A section of the first chorus, he plays both. So he seems to be quite free with that, and it's a beautiful sound. Sometimes he'll even play blues phrases on there, and I think it's in his second chorus he actually plays like a blues third, you know, minor third to major third on the F minor chord. So that's interesting. And there's a phrase that he uses that implies symmetric dominant over the F7 with a flat 9 to B flat minor, and he uses that in two different places, but it's a complete recycle of the exact same phrase. One of the most interesting things that I found is towards the end of the solo, he superimposes a tritone relationship. So on an F minor chord, in the 7th bar of the A section, he plays B minor 7 to E7, you know, just kind of straight up the B minor arpeggio and then down the E7 arpeggio. So that really made my ears prick up, and it works. One of the first things that I like to do when I'm learning a tune is to try and look for ways to put my own stamp on it. How am I going to articulate the melody, etc. And with a tune like Voyage that's quite active, you know, there's a lot of eighth note phrases, and a lot of it pretty much has to be the way that Kenny Barron intended. But you can actually change the rhythm of at least a few bars of the A section and you know, get some kind of personal variation on it. This is my idea. So this is a little tip for the piano players when it comes to arranging the bridge. Now, you might be tempted to play the melody up an octave so that you can get some left-hand voicings underneath. Which is okay, but it sounds a little bit thin. So if we keep the melody down here, etc., one thing I like to do is to play these voicings in the left hand that are centered around having the fifth of the chord at the bottom. And then these ones for the final 2/5 will work well. So what's going on there? We've got on the D flat chord, the fifth at the bottom. Same with the minor chord. There's E minor 7, A7. A7's just tonic and 7th. And then back to 5th and the 3rd of the chord. So it's the minor 7th and the major 7th chord in the 2-5-1. So the 2 chord and the 1 chord that have the 5th in the bass. You'll notice too in the right hand I'm putting in there's the 7th of the D flat chord. So I've got this. All the voices are taken care of, it's just how the voicing is split up the piano. 5, 3, 7, 5. So let's talk a little bit about the chord scale relationships within Voyage. So this is a tonic minor tune in the key of F minor. And the first chord symbol and the second chord symbol on the chart say minor 6, 9. And so the chord scale relationship there is very much melodic minor for both of those. So F melodic minor and then upper half step to F sharp melodic minor. And that has a really pretty, moody type of sound. So that should be your first choice when getting started improvising on this tune. From that point, the next chord is F7 with a flat 9, and you've probably noticed by now the flat 9 is in the melody. And so that F7 is forming a perfect cadence to the 4 chord of B flat minor. And so we get a chance to really outline that cadence. And one choice that we can use there is a Phrygian dominant scale. So that Phrygian dominant is the 5th mode of a harmonic minor scale, in this case B flat harmonic minor. And that's a good sound. I recommend you check it out. However, once we get to that B flat minor, that B flat minor to me is very much a Dorian sound, and it works really well. And that chord, like a Dorian mode, exists in the relative major. So chord 2 of A flat major is B flat minor, and that's where the Dorian mode comes from. So it either way that you look at it, whether it's, you're thinking about this in terms of, F natural minor or A flat major, it's still a Dorian mode. And then the next thing that happens is we have a 2-5 back to the 1 chord, in this case a minor 2-5, G half diminished C7 back to F minor. And one scale choice that you can use on that 2-5 is just the harmonic minor of the parent key. So that will give you, the 2nd mode of the harmonic minor, and you can also use, again, another Phrygian dominant, the 5th mode of the harmonic minor, in this case F harmonic minor. They're not the only choices, but that's not a bad place to start. If you're looking for some common options there, you could try using Locrian sharp 2 on the G half diminished. So that mode is the 6th mode of B flat melodic minor. And as the name suggests, it's just a Locrian mode with a natural 2. And it's a good sound, and it does kind of free up the ears a little bit. And it's a bit more of an open sound than the regular Locrian mode. And with the 5 chord, there's a wealth of options that we can try, but you might want to try to use symmetric dominant there. And later on, I've got some examples of symmetric dominant lines. If you're looking for some more advanced scale options on this tune, I would highly recommend that you check out the minor 6 diminished scale for use on the F minor and then the F sharp minor chords. So what is the minor 6 diminished scale? So we've already established that the main chord scale relationship with those minor 6/9 chords is the melodic minor, and that's a great sound. If we add a flat 6 to that scale, in the case of F melodic minor, we're going to be adding a D flat. We end up with an 8-note scale, and this gives us quite a flexible scale, both in terms of melodies but also in terms of chords. So one of the things that these 8-note scales give us is when we play scalic lines, and it doesn't matter how many octaves up and down we do that, the chord tones are always on the beat, assuming that we start on the beat. And that's a really good sound, and I found these scales to be really useful. And ironically, I was playing them for years without really even knowing what they were called, and sometimes I'd even question myself, saying, well, I find that when I play on that chord, I'm adding this note, but I didn't really know what it was called. But these scales, to my ears, and in terms of the theory behind them, they seem really close to the truth about what's going on with almost all chord scale relationships. And so much so that I'm getting to the point now where I'm thinking that regular major scale and minor scale harmony is actually wrong. It's actually a fudge, and these 6 diminished scales are actually closer to the truth. So here's some little melodic examples of using that scale. Another thing that these 6 diminished scales give us is a whole lot of really strong chordal options. And they function in quite a different manner to your regular, say, major scale, which we end up with our 7 chords as we progress up all the modes of the major scale. The 6 diminished scale, every chord is either a 6th chord, in this case F minor 6, or it's a diminished 7th chord. And the diminished 7th chord is a rootless C7 with a flat 9. So as we move up the chord scale relationships within a minor 6 diminished chord, we either get F minor 6 or an implied C7 with a flat 9. And that gives us a whole lot of comping options, but it also gives us a lot of options for writing, for whether it's for 3 horns or for big bands. And you might already be familiar with the sound of chords moving on this scale, but not necessarily know what it was. So here's some examples. The next few examples that I'd like to share is some basic exercises to get you, navigating the chord scale relationships of the A section. And I'm just going to use the simpler chord scale choices at the moment, melodic minor on the minor 6/9 chords and Dorian on the B flat minor, for example. But one thing that I'd like to share with you is when I studied with Hal Galper, he said to me, in terms of melodic improvisation, that everything is a pickup. Every little melody fragment is going somewhere. And so the way that I've written these examples, these exercises, is they start with a pickup of various lengths. So here's the first exercise, and this starts on the end of 4 and finishes on the end of 4. So here's example 7, and it continues in a similar vein, but this time we're targeting the thirds of the chords, and we've got a 2/8 note pickup to the downbeat. Here's example 8. With this example, we're targeting the fifths of the chords, and we've got a 3/8 note pickup to the downbeat. Here's example 9, and this one targets the sevenths of the chords, and again we've got a 3/8 note pickup to the downbeat. Okay, so we've had a look at some scales to use on the A section, and let's put it into practice now. So I'd like to remind you that Dizzy Gillespie's advice is to think of a rhythm and put some notes on it, and that's probably the best advice that any improviser can get. Just running scales mindlessly against chords is not going to result in engaging solos by any means. So in this next example, I've used rhythm to create motives, and sometimes I've transposed those ideas, especially the ideas that I play on the F minor chord, then just like Kenny Barron did in his Melody, I've taken those up a half step at times. Also, I've tried to incorporate some use of the symmetric dominant scale on the C7 chord. Have a listen. In example 12, I've used chromaticism to keep chord tones on the beat. And on the F7 chord, I've used the symmetric dominant scale. So I end up with a D natural in there, which creates a big contrast when it finally hits B flat minor. In example 13, I've continued transposing ideas, but using a bit more syncopation this time. And on the F7 chord, I'm making a different use of the symmetric dominant scale. Now on a symmetric dominant scale, because of the symmetry built into the scale, you can access 4 different major triads on that chord. So on F7 that gives us an F triad, an A flat triad, a D triad and a B triad. So in this example I've played a D triad and an A flat triad to create a sense of tension. It sounds a little bit outside the chord changes. See what you think. So in example 14, I've concentrated on some arpeggio type figures to get through bars F7 through B flat minor and then G half diminished through C7. And so these are transposed ideas, and then I expand on them even further. This exercise will help you get oriented with the bridge. So as we know, the key centers of Voyage in the bridge, ascend from D flat major, D, E flat to E, and then we have a 2/5 back to the tonic chord of F minor. And that's unusual. Not many tunes will ascend in key centers. So this exercise, we're going to play some scalic lines, but we're going to be methodical in targeting chord tones. So if we play a scale line and we start on the 3rd of the chord, in this case E minor, we end up with chord tones on the beat, and they'll all be the 3rd of the chord. And that works even for the final 2/5 of G half to C7 if we use the F harmonic minor scale. And that has a particular sound to it, all of those thirds landing on the beat. And we can go through and we can do the same thing with the 5th of the chord. Now we can talk about whether, that the 5th is the least important note in the chord, but it's still a good exercise to do. Let's do the 7ths. That gets us there as well. And so those exercises are really good for getting yourself oriented on the bridge of the song. So exercise 16 builds upon what we did in exercise 15, and we connect all of the chords, targeting the thirds all the way through the bridge. So here's number 16. In exercise number 17, we're still targeting the thirds of the chords, but we've broken up the shape of the lines. There's now more interest, there's a more interesting contour, and instead of staying completely diatonic, we're playing the flat 9 on the dominant chords. In exercise number 18, we've got a different approach now, and we're simply targeting the third of the chord on each dominant chord. And we've got an enclosure of that third. So it's a bit more of a bebop style line. In exercise 19, we're still targeting the thirds on each dominant chord, but then we're adding an altered sound. So we're passing through the sharp 9 and the flat 9 of each chord, and then we have an enclosure of the 5th degree of each of the major 7th chords. In exercise 20, we're using the symmetric dominant scale for C7 on the minor 2-5 of G half diminished C7. And it picks up all the chord tones and it works really well.